Good evening, everyone. I'm the storyteller, here to help you fall asleep with these chilling horror stories. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like the video. I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is, so feel free to leave a comment. When you're ready, get comfortable and relax. Get all started. All units on duty, we've just received a call from a woman claiming something is outside her house. Respond immediately to the location. I slam my foot on the gas pedal and merge onto the highway. Glancing over at my partner, Chris, I raise an eyebrow. Think we're gonna see a monster tonight? I joke about the call. Shut it, Miller, Chris replies, laughing. They said to take every call seriously, but screw it, I guess. I was supposed to be home in an hour to enjoy a late dinner with Michelle in front of the TV, but at this rate, that seemed impossible. I was too nervous to call her right now, not wanting her to get upset about my potential absence tonight. We continue down the highway, eyes on the address given by dispatch. Just a few minutes left, so I press a bit harder to get there faster. Do you think you'll get that TV dinner with your wife tonight? Chris asks. I shrug, watching the cars and streetlights flash by. If this is the last call, hopefully, we haven't had time to do anything together for weeks. I sigh. I really miss the times we used to have. I get what you mean. This job is crap. Let's just handle this call. It's probably nothing, Chris reassures me. I take the exit into a quiet residential neighborhood and park in front of a row of houses. We approach a secluded two-story home. Double-checking the address, I realize we've arrived. We get out of the car and see the distressed woman who made the call waiting on her porch as she spots us. We quickly make our way to her as she steps onto the veranda. I notice she's been crying, tears streaming down her cheeks. Ma'am, it's okay, we're here now. Is the man still outside your house? I place a hand on her shoulder, trying to calm her. I hear her sobbing. It's not a person, the woman cries. I can't even explain what it did. She breaks off mid-sentence, collapsing into more tears. Chris and I exchange worried looks before turning back to her. Where do you think it is? Is it still here? Are you sure it's not a person? Chris asks, his voice taking on a more serious tone. The woman continues to snivel. It's in the garden. I'm sure it wasn't a person. Hurry up. We ask her to go back inside while we draw our weapons from our holsters and turn on our flashlights, as there was no light source in the garden. We step into the garden and turn on our flashlights. As soon as we enter the grass, an eerie and unsettling feeling washes over me. I can't see or hear anything yet, but I don't feel safe either. Chris and I sweep our flashlights across the entire garden, casting quick glances around, but there's nothing to see. See anything? I ask Chris. He shakes his head. No, so far it seems like nonsense, he replies, still scanning the area. We both notice a patio adjacent to the house and shine our lights underneath it. From our position, we see nothing, just wooden beams supporting the patio and partially blocking our view. We decide to check beneath the patio. The patio was quite high, so we approach it and step underneath, moving our flashlights back and forth to see if anyone is hiding. We thought it was likely, as in such calls people often hide under patios. But there was nothing under this patio. For the most part, it was empty. It was long, so we walked across it and thoroughly checked, still seeing no one or anything. I lower my flashlight, feeling that something is wrong. I shake it off, ready to dismiss it as a false alarm, when I hear Chris call out, "Miller, come here." I walk over to him and see him slumped in the left corner of the patio. I stand beside him, trying to see what he's looking at. "What is it?" I ask, as he looks at me confused. Chris moves his hands through the dirt, picks something up, and hands it to me, which I reluctantly take. I examine it. It was a dog's leg, with blood-covered fur and teeth embedded in it. I gasp and drop the leg, looking at Chris, who is equally shocked. "What the hell is that?" I ask him. He doesn't respond, just shock written all over his face. I see it in his eyes. I know how much Chris hates dead animals or animal remains, so I don't question him further. I look back at the leg and inspect it. It looked like something had been gnawing on it, but the teeth seemed to come straight from the gums. I'm not sure, it was a strange, disturbing sight that I couldn't explain. I hesitate before taking the dog leg as evidence. It emitted a terrible, rotten smell, and the leg felt limp. I wanted to vomit, but knew I had to take it with me. Chris and I stand up as I start to go pale. Holding the leg of a possible dead dog didn't feel right. Chris pats me on the back. "I'm going inside to talk to the woman. You stay in the car, okay?" Chris seems to have regained his composure. I nod and swallow hard. "Yeah, thanks, I appreciate it." I place the leg in the trunk and slam it shut as my phone vibrates in my pocket. I pull it out. It's Michelle calling me. I take a deep breath and answer the call, holding the phone to my ear. "Hey, Michelle," I say into the phone, still unsettled by the situation. "Sweetheart, are you okay? You're not home yet." I hear Michelle speak. I look down. "Yeah, I know. I'm probably working a late shift tonight. Sorry," I respond guiltily. "Oh, that's fine, I guess. Is something wrong?" "Yeah, everything's fine. Just had to respond to a weird call and I think about the dog leg. Found something strange." I sigh into the phone. There's a moment of silence on the other end. "Well, I really hope everything's okay." "It is. Trust me on this one. It's nothing major," I say. I see Chris coming out of the house. "All right, but stay safe, Miller, please." The call ends. Chris and I get back into the patrol car, sit for a minute, and reflect on what just happened. I look around the neighborhood. It was dark. Almost every house had no lights on the streets and no streetlights were lit. Just darkness. The atmosphere was different from anything I'd experienced in my 9 years as a police officer. "What did the lady say?" I finally ask Chris as I start the engine. I asked her if she had any cameras so we could see if someone was coming into her garden, but she said she didn't. She said she saw some kind of creature in her garden eating an animal. He points to the trunk where the dog leg is. I understand what that means. We probably need to bring this leg back to the station and have it examined. Something feels supernatural here. I wanted to say something, but didn't. I agreed that no person could just rip off a dog's leg, and I don't believe a person would have the nerve to try eating it. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the call was something that had to be considered. Suddenly, a signal comes through from dispatch over my radio. I quickly turn on the radio as Chris and I listen. "We've just received 2 calls from people saying something is in their backyard. Officers are already on the way to an address. I need other officers at another location immediately." Chris and I look at each other with confused fear. Weren't we just dealing with a similar call? We say nothing as I receive the address and start driving faster. It was only 6 minutes away, so not far, but something was off. Something was wrong, and it didn't look good. The radio crackles again, and I begin to fear what it could be. I hear the voice of a dispatcher once more. "We've just received another call from someone saying something is moving on their property. We need officers on site immediately." I repeat, we've just received a 4th call that something is moving on someone's property. "What the hell is going on here?" Chris says. My hands start to shake the steering wheel as I make a turn. "Something's not right, man." My voice trembles. "Pull yourself together, Miller. It'll be okay." Chris tries to calm me. I shake my head. The radio crackles again. Chris and I listen intently. We've received a call from a man saying something is on the side of his house. Officers are now on site. "Shit," I mutter to myself. I continue driving to the originally dispatched address, now pressing the gas harder. We approach our destination. Something like this has never happened before. We've never received multiple calls in a row about something being in people's gardens. This was different. Reports of something in people's gardens whatever that meant. It had never been on this level. We pull up to a house on the street and immediately draw our weapons. After the last call, we acted cautiously. And with all these additional reports, we're not taking it lightly because something was seriously wrong. Chris and I peer into the backyard but see nothing. The lights in the house are on, so at least we know the occupant is okay. That was until we hear the sound of a man letting out the most horrifying scream from inside the house that I'd ever heard. We rush to the front door, preparing to forcibly enter. Chris gives me a nervous look and I signal him to be brave. I look at the door and take a deep breath, still hearing the screams. I recoil and take a step away from the door. I run to the door and shove my whole body through it, just as the screaming stops. The door slams shut, and I fall shoulder first to the ground. I see Chris running into the house, drawing his weapon, shouting, "Police!" The screaming has still ceased, and I start to think we're too late. The living room and dining area are visible from the entrance, and we see nothing in either room. Then we decide to check the kitchen. I sense that the kitchen is just around the corner, so we walk to the living room and make a hard left turn around the wall. As we enter the kitchen, we see the remains of a man, hunched over the sink, mutilated from the neck down to his calf. I gag a little, feeling the urge to vomit. I lower my head and lower my weapon. We were too late. I didn't have time to pity myself because I soon felt Chris desperately trying to get my attention. I lift my head and see him pointing to the kitchen window. The kitchen window offers a full view of the backyard, and I see a dark figure neither built nor shaped like a human, quickly crawling out of the backyard and disappearing out of sight. Chris and I quickly move to the back door and open it wide, swiftly making our way down the steps and sprinting further into the backyard. We see the figure nowhere else and hurry to the garden gate, open it, and run back into the front yard, but again, no sign of the figure we just saw. We lower our weapons and sigh in disappointment. My question was, what was that thing, and how did it escape so quickly? I hear my radio crackle again as I slowly approach the car. Officers have found a woman dead in her backyard. She was slashed through the fence. It looked like she died just a few minutes ago. We need paramedics on site immediately. What the hell is going on here? I hear Chris say. He leans against the garage door and sinks to the ground. I feel bad for Chris. It was clear this was a lot for him to process. I understand, because all of this was so inexplicable. I get into the car and slam the door shut, unsure of what to do. I scan the street, trying to look for the creature, but still see nothing. It had really just vanished, blown away by the wind. I hear my radio crackle again. Dispatchers received another call from someone saying something is in their backyard. They need officers on site immediately. I didn't know what to do anymore. I was convinced I was living in a hellish, repeating nightmare, but I did the only thing I could in this state. I take out my radio and say, "We found a man dead in his house." I repeat, "We found a man dead in his house." An hour later, I arrive home. It was almost 1 a.m. and I'm exhausted. We had to wait for paramedics at that house and explain to them what happened. We had to bring the dogleg back to the station and explain to the sheriff what happened in that house. And it was a whole process I didn't want to bore anyone with. I reach into my pocket for the keys and fumble for a moment before inserting them into the lock and opening the door, sighing in relief to finally be where I wanted to be. I toss my radio onto a chair by the front door and forget to turn it off. My relief is instantly stripped away as I see my wife's bloody head hanging from the ceiling. I scream and drop to my knees, beginning to cry. It was already a horrible night. I couldn't lose Michelle too, not her. "Sweetheart?" I hear Michelle's voice from the stairs, just before I also hear her scream. I'm confused as I lift my head and look at the stairs, and there she is. Standing on the stairs, she stares in shock at the ceiling. I look back at the head on the ceiling. It looked almost exactly like Michelle's, but how? If her head was there, but she was alive on the stairs, that meant... What the hell? I didn't know how to express my thoughts otherwise. I look at my overwhelmed wife. Did you hear anyone come in or anything? Michelle looks at me. I can see how scared and completely confused she is. Miller, Michelle, this is important. Did you see anything outside the house? No, I didn't hear anyone come in either. I assume she's telling the truth, but that doesn't explain how the head was identical to my wife's. The facial features, the hair, everything. Slowly, I stand up, walk past the stairs, and head to the kitchen. Something is pulling me there, and my gut tells me to go. What are you doing? What are you going to do with that severed head? I hear my wife scream at me. I stammer for a few seconds before getting my words together. Wait a minute. I walk into the kitchen, look at the countertop, and almost have a heart attack. Michelle? I scream, but I hear no response. I keep looking at the countertop. There was a head, covered in blood, almost identical to mine. I try to piece it together, but I just can't. I damn well didn't know what was happening here. My mouth hangs open, searching for more words, but I'm terrified of the situation. These heads, who were they originally, and how did they get here? I feel my phone vibrating in my pocket and pull it out. It's a message from Chris. He usually doesn't text me this late, so I'm confused. I open it. I examine the message carefully. It reads, "I'm still on duty, and we received a call from someone saying they saw something in their neighbor's gardens. I have the address. It's your house. Don't panic. I'm on my way." My heart sinks as I read. I still don't know what the things in people's gardens were doing, whatever they were, but I didn't want to find out. I'm uncertain about everything at this point. Michelle, I continue, saying my wife's name, but I still hear no response from her. I walk out of the kitchen and see her standing at one of the back doors near the dining room, looking at the backyard and trembling. I walk beside her to see what she's looking at. There, I see it. The same dark figure I saw earlier stands in the middle of our backyard, staring at me lifelessly. This time, I can make out some of its features. It was tall and stocky, its arms and claws so long they looked unnatural. I couldn't discern any facial features, but I could see its eyes. Only darkness resided within them. I felt nothing as I looked at it. I lost all feeling in my body and mind. I only felt fear and dread. I felt like a bomb about to explode. What was once responding to calls and experiencing this was now me living through it. A heavy atmosphere prevailed, and the creature radiated an energy that made my heart race. My actions and thoughts began to be flooded and penetrated by something supernatural. I felt abstracted. One thought, and only one thought, crossed my mind. My phone was still in my hand. I opened it and dialed 911. I looked at Michelle, who was moving closer to me every second without saying a word. I looked back at the thing in our backyard. It moved into a crawling position and made sounds I couldn't even recognize. I held the phone to my ear and heard a dispatcher pick up. 911, what's your emergency? I said nothing for a moment. All I could do was look at the creature, at the being that was in my backyard. What is your emergency? The dispatcher repeated. I finally found the courage to say something. Something I didn't think I'd say that night. Something is in my backyard. I began to hear my radio crackle seconds after that sentence. My phone rings on the table beside my recliner in the cozy living room of my Chicago apartment. It's him again. Just calling to check in, he says sometimes. I consider checking if the call recording app is running, but decide it's not worth the effort. I've tried dozens of times to record his calls without success. When I play them back, I hear my own voice on the recording, but every response I receive is nothing but static. The call log on my phone never shows that I've received a call from him after we hang up. My mobile carrier also has no records when I check. For an older man, his technological skills must be top-notch. When I retired from the police 6 years ago, he remained a suspect in my oldest and most frustrating unsolved cases. I call him the Imitator. He kills 3 victims, once a month for 3 months, using the methods of some of history's most infamous serial killers. Once his cycle is complete, he disappears for 9 months. The cycle would restart in a new city in Illinois. Sometimes he vanishes for a year or 2, but he always comes back. He never stops calling either. Tension builds at my temples as I answer the call and hold the phone to my ear. "Hello." "Happy holidays, Detective Bauer," says the calm voice on the other end of the line. He calls several times a year, and I fear each and every call. His tone always sounds like that of an old friend. "How are you? Is retirement treating you well?" "I'm about the same as the last time you called," I reply. Talking is better than nothing. Otherwise, he'll call back dozens of times anyway. Retirement isn't very restful when you know you're still out there. Maybe I can change that someday. 6 prisons would gladly offer you a cozy little cell and 3 warm meals a day. I'll bring you myself. Just tell me where you are, Alan. The voice on the other end breaks into cheerful laughter. His name is Alan Lehman, I believe, though I'm not sure. A bookseller by that name disappeared in 1986, the same year the Imitator claimed his first victims. Alan liquidated his assets, emptied his bank accounts, and vanished without warning. How did I make the connection? I hate to admit it, but he told me himself. I was 2 years into my career and still had the new car scent of a rookie on my uniform. Detective Dennis Garrison, an experienced officer, had involved me in the investigation. During my first week, Alan called and unexpectedly identified himself to me. Until then, he had been active for over 5 years, and we were no closer to catching him than during his first cycle. Boredom, he told me, was his motive for identifying himself. He thought that if we knew who he was, we might present him with a greater challenge. "Bartholomew," he purrs through the phone line. "I told you 2 years ago where I am, and I've tried my best to meet you. All I asked was that you don't call the police, but you didn't listen. Instead of discussing our connection face to face, I had to deal with the 2 officers you sent to that place. Why should I trust you again? You'd just end up with more blood on your hands." A sour knot tightens in my stomach at the mention of the fallen officers. 2 years earlier, Alan had called and offered to meet me. He said he wanted to meet the man who had spent so many years chasing him, and maybe he would allow me to arrest him. I shouldn't call the police or he wouldn't show up. 4 years into my retirement, my training still lingered at the back of my mind like tar on a roof. Of course, I wanted to catch Alan. The monster had avoided capture for most of 4 decades, but approaching a self-confessed serial killer was madness. I knew I wasn't in shape anymore. Even if I managed to apprehend him, I had no authority. The arrest wouldn't hold. What if after all these years of hunting, I messed it up and let the beast go free? I decided to call the state police and inform them of the time and place. Better for the young officers to handle the operation. The officer who took the call was an old friend, Walter Dempsey, a tough detective himself, who was preparing for retirement at the end of the year. Walter tried to reassure me that someone was just playing a cruel prank on me, but I insisted that our main suspect would be waiting there. Everyone at my old precinct knew about my calls. The lack of call logs or recordings made them skeptical, and I understood why. Some police officers don't handle retirement well. They can't let go of the work. They try to find ways to stay relevant with their old colleagues. Walter, on the other hand, thought it might be a troubled teenager messing with me. a handful of younger officers at the precinct thought my mind was playing tricks on me. Maybe they were right, but not regarding the calls. Still, Walter agreed to bring a young patrol officer named Vincent Haas to the location to conduct a search. It was a courtesy gesture, he said, for my years of service. Later, I learned he hadn't even noted the tip in the patrol log for the day. He didn't consider the tip important enough to make the search official. No one knew where the two had gone. Hours after he was supposed to take my call, I had heard nothing from him. My relentless calls and texts went unanswered. In a panic, I called the police station, but no one had heard from Dempsey or Haas in hours. Their shift had ended, but their patrol cars never checked back in. All attempts to reach them via the radio remained unanswered. After speaking with the station chief and reporting my conversation with Dempsey, he sent 5 units to the dilapidated warehouse on the outskirts of Chicago, where Alan Lehman had requested to meet me. Unlike Walter, they arrived heavily armed and in greater numbers. I still don't believe the captain thought I was telling the truth, but he was smart enough not to take the risk. They found the patrol car in front of the building. Inside, they discovered a bloodbath. Both men were found kneeling in the middle of a filthy room with execution-style gunshot wounds to the back of their heads. They had been slit post-mortem. Their blood pooled around them in a horrifying crimson disk. A message had been hastily written on the floor from the repulsive blood runoff. Bartholomew, I just wanted to talk. Now look what you've made me do. Shame, shame, old man. That day, I told myself I would meet him alone if the opportunity arose again. Doing things by the book led to the deaths of 2 brave men, just to do a favor for a retired detective. A bit of solace after the end of their shift, they probably thought. This was the first conversation since their deaths where he had even entertained the idea of a meeting. Sleep rarely comes at night anymore. If it does, it's haunted by cruel images of Dempsey and Haas, sending them to their deaths. I have to make this work. I'll meet you, Alan, I reply. Name the time and place. No police officers. I won't bear the weight of another death. We're not young men anymore. I'll be 60, and you've got a decade on me. Aren't you tired? Silence from the other end fills my head. Alan, I ask. I'll meet you, just... Good, Bartholomew, he says. Meet me at this address, and we'll have a little conversation. Do you have pen and paper? I park my car at the site of a long-abandoned gas station 4 miles outside Chicago. A sign flaps in the wind, advertising gasoline prices that haven't been seen in 20 years. A relic of bygone days, I think to myself. It's almost poetic of him to choose this place. It used to be useful, but now it's decaying, taking up space just like me. The gas pumps crumble to rust flakes. 2 large storefront windows are so dusty and grimy that my bright headlights can't penetrate the darkness within. Everything here has been left to decay, a place that embodies the ravages of time. The bright sheet of yellow legal paper attached to the window stands out like a lighthouse against the ruin. Carefully, I step out of the car and brush off the side. My P08 is buried in the holster under my jacket. The slim body of the gun comforts me for a moment. I know I shouldn't be here, but finding a solution is all I have left. By the end of the night, I'll have my man, or my man will have me. Either way, the calls will stop. As soon as I see the bastard, I'll put a bullet in his head and one in his heart. One for Dempsey, the other for Haas. If I'm successful, I'll place the empty shell casings on their gravestones. I pull the P08 from its holder and disengage the safety. Every step I take across the debris-strewn parking lot fills the calm night air. I scan my surroundings as I approach the note, seeing no sign of anyone or anything. The ghostly gas station is deserted, aside from an old police officer and this fluttering yellow note. My blood runs cold as I pull the note from the window. Flowing calligraphy fills the page. I can't help but think what a steady hand he has as an older man. Bartholomew, if you're reading this, then you've shown up just like the good detective I always hoped for. My apologies if you're disappointed not to find me here. I haven't backed out of our deal, but I wanted to see you from a safe distance to ensure you're alone this time. While it wouldn't bother me at all to send a few more of your old friends, I'd much rather speak face to face. As you read this, I'm watching you from afar down the street. Night vision technology has come a long way over the decades. Don't worry, I wouldn't shoot you. What a cowardly and anticlimactic ending to our cat and mouse game. Get back in your car and flash your high beams 3 times so I know you've read this note. Wait until you see 3 flashes in response, then drive down the gravel road toward the light. If you pass the light 3 miles further, you'll see a hunting cabin. Come inside. You can bring your weapon. I know you have one. It won't keep you safe. Your friend, Alan Lehman. The smooth paper becomes stiff and rough as I roll it into a ball. I sit behind the wheel, turn the key, and the car purrs back to life. I turn the light switch 3 times, briefly illuminating the field behind the dilapidated gas station. Dry grass sways in the evening breeze, and the yellow eyes of nocturnal creatures reflect the unexpected flashes. Then nothing. Darkness swallows my world again. The dull neon dashboard lights glow faintly against the twilight inside the vehicle. Sweat drips down my neck. The night isn't overly warm, but I feel the sick bastard staring at me through his night vision device. A brilliant beam of light shoots into the sky from the distant car and disappears. Then a second, before darkness returns. Now a third. He's here. I shift gears, pull my car back onto the gravel road, and drive toward the signal. Gravel beads the lower part of my car like half-hearted shotgun pellets as I creep along the winding path. The swaying grass and yellow eyes return to my field of vision as I slowly roll forward. Too many yellow eyes are watching me. The hairs on my arms stand up as I look around and perceive the penetrating stares. It's almost as if this evil man has drawn every dark thing around him on this eerie night. Howling and yelping fill the air. At first, they sound menacing, but slowly they begin to sound plaintive, like warnings in the darkness. Turn around. It's not too late. Death awaits you on this road. I slam my hands against the car horn, and the high-pitched screech causes the yellow eyes to break and disperse. The field is dark again. Tall grass sways lazily. No further warnings. My car tires crunch on the gravel as I park at the spot where the light came from. On the ground lies a floodlight, a night vision device without a rifle, and a tattered paperback. I roll it with my foot and see a deep red horse on the cover and bold yellow words hanging above. The Catcher in the Rye. As I slowly crept through the darkness, replaying my life and contemplating my precarious future, Alan Lehman had read a book at this spot. I laughed aloud. From the moment I left the house tonight until now, I felt like I was on a collision course with my ultimate fate, while a murderous old man sat in the dark with a paperback. I step the book into the tall grass and glide back behind the car's wheel. My mind flirts with the idea of picking up the night vision device to try to spot Alan in the distance, but I decide against it. Leaving it is smarter. If he manages to either kill me or escape, this will be the first physical evidence he's left behind in half a decade. No point in leaving my fingerprints all over it. I feel my heart pounding against my chest as the car continues to roll. It's still a long way, but as my headlights flicker back and forth, they catch the distant silhouette of a cabin. Alone on a small hill, it stands there like a little castle in the pitch-black darkness. An evil man sits inside, I think, waiting for a meeting with me. My mind races with an anxious survival instinct. Turn the car around. No, I'm too close. He would never agree to meet if I turned back now. This isn't a time for cowardice. He will kill you. Is that what you want? You're not a martyr, Bart Bauer. Maybe, but I'll try to kill him first. And what if he does? This is a trap. Do you really think he'll let you bring him to the police? No, I really don't believe that. It's too late anyway. My car creeps up a slight incline from the gravel road onto a packed dirt driveway. I'm here. The cabin is just 50 yards up the small hill. The shutters have collapsed into the yard and are dry rotted in the sunlight. All windows are broken, leaving jagged glass shards in the warped frames. Holes puncture the roof in a dozen places, and the roughly hewn wooden beams hang down. The front door is closed. Through one of the broken windows, I see a silhouette. I turn off the ignition and step out of the car. Dry autumn air fills my nostrils, mixed with the scent of old wood from the cabin. The night is cool, but a chill pierces deep into my bones. Decades of work end in a rundown cabin on a hill. A rusty creak pierces my ears as the cabin door opens. I aim my P-08 and fire 3 shots into the center of the opening and wait. My heart races, and I can feel my pulse in my ears. Struggling to focus in the dark, I can't tell if I hit him. "Whoa, stop," Alan explains. "I thought we were going to talk. This is really not the way to start a conversation, my old friend." "Alan Lehman," I call out. "Step out of the house with your hands raised." "Good, good," he chirps. "Keep it that way, Bartholomew. By my heart, I'll do as you ask." My eyes have now adjusted to the darkness of the land. The dark silhouette of a thin man fills the doorway. His arms, eerily long, reach so high they almost touch the frame. I take a deep breath and cold sweat breaks out in my eyes as I pull the trigger 3 times. Each bullet hits the center, but Alan doesn't even sway. Sirens howl in my head, urging me to get into the car and drive away, but I'm so close. I squeeze the trigger until nothing but a hollow click is heard. Yet he stands in the doorway, motionless and unharmed. "I told you your little toy wouldn't keep you safe," he says in a condescending voice. "I came here in good faith, and yet you try to shoot me like a pesky animal. Shame, Bartholomew. Shame." My mind reels, and dizziness overcomes my vision. I feel my stomach clench as my blood pressure spikes. I don't understand. There was no way I could have missed him. "I'm feeling a bit angry, Detective. Last chance, come inside and talk to me. If you want answers, you should come in. I won't be here long. If you continue to be stubborn, you might not be anymore." The figure disappears into the darkness of the house. I fumble for the keys in my pocket and start to make my way back to the car. Reaching for the door handle, I prepare to climb in and drive away quickly. I thought it was too late to turn back. That wasn't what I expected. I can't hurt him. "It? Come in," he commands. "Now!" My legs feel like they've lost their own mobility as I surge forward and stumble up the hill. I struggle to turn around, but my knees bend against my will, and I climb the steps. The planks of the old wooden porch bend under my weight, and I try to pick up speed before I fall through, but I maintain my steady pace. My body carries me further to a worn sofa opposite an old armchair. Alan is already sitting in the armchair as my body moves to the sofa and gently settles onto the cushions. It's too dark to see anything, but dust particles fly into my nose, and the smell of mold overwhelms me. I try to lift my arms and legs, but they lie heavy on the sofa. It feels like I'm a puppet without strings. Whatever force he's exerting over me, I can't resist it. "Here we are, Bartholomew," he says. "Look how old you've become. It's been ages since I've seen you." "We never met," I say, as calmly as possible. My mind is in full panic, but I do my best not to show it. "I've seen your picture 100 times in the files. I should have seen you." Alan laughs. "You saw pictures of Alan, not me," he purrs as he says the name. "I left this vessel a long time ago, Detective. You've never seen me." I hear the dry crackling of snapping fingers. A soft, yellow glow blooms on a table between us. The wick of a thick tallow candle ignites. Alan's silhouette comes into sharper focus. Other candles in the room begin to light up. The room comes alive with dancing light spots. Before me stands the being I've pursued for so many years. My stomach tightens. If there were a hint of moisture in me, I'd be wetting my pants. I'm still frozen by a compelling force. Otherwise, I'd be running away in fear. The outline of a man fills the chair in front of me, but he is faceless. A complete absence of color or texture. I'd call it a living shadow, but the being is somehow darker. The being I call Alan Lehman is not black. It is the absence of light. Darker than the depths of any cave. In the silhouette, there is simply nothing. What are you? I stammer. I am simply Bartholomew, it says. The cool and composed voice of Alan has vanished. The being sounds like 1,000 voices speaking at once. There's no emotion in its words. I have always been. I will always be. Every man and woman will meet me one day, but only a few have spoken with me. Hot tears fill the corners of my eyes. I want to speak, ask something, anything. I'm scared that if I open my mouth, I'll vomit. Santa Muerte, King Yama, Thanatos, Maweth. People have called me many different things. The list is long but tedious. I am Death, Detective Bauer. Not a dealer of death, but death itself. No, I say, this is beyond my understanding. I'll go crazy. You're not. But I am, old friend, says the chorus of voices. I'm tired of my duties. Your kind has glorified the darkest among you. Bundy, Dahmer, Gacy, Gain. Their artistic embellishments of my work have fascinated me for some time. I've even replicated their efforts for my own pleasure, but I want to be free of it. It stands up from the sofa and begins to approach me. The light of life begins to flicker within you, Bartholomew. Your days are numbered. Its hand reaches out to me, extending a finger. Slowly, it presses the tip against my forehead. My body cramps uncontrollably, and I feel utterly cold. Learning so much about death can lead you to become Death, Bartholomew. When the last grain of sand falls in the hourglass of your life, you will replace me. I wake up in my bed in a pool of sweat. My clothes from the previous night are still on, and I feel the belt cutting into my waist. A dull pain radiates from the center of my head, so I go to the bathroom for some medicine. It's the middle of the night. I can't decide if it was a terrible dream or a horrifying reality, but my head hurts so damn much. I turn on the bathroom light and walk to the medicine cabinet. As I reach to open it, my heart skips a beat as I look in the mirror. In the middle of my forehead is a gray fingerprint. The whites of my eyes have turned black. No, not black. No light, like a living shadow. It was a chilly autumn morning in October 2023 in a small town called Cedar Falls, nestled in the heart of Wisconsin. My father was a dedicated detective with the Cedar Falls Police Department. One morning, he acted strangely. I watched as he walked into the kitchen, dressed in his police uniform, and headed toward the coffee maker in our modern kitchen. He poured his favorite blue ceramic mug before sitting down across from me at the small, round wooden table. He brought the steaming blue mug to his lips. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled my nose. It didn't take long before I noticed the dark circles under his eyes. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Between occasional sips of his coffee, he stared blankly out the window into the backyard. His deep brown eyes seemed distant and full of worry. "Dad, are you okay?" I asked, concerned. The words seemed to snap him out of his trance-like state. "I'm fine, kiddo," he sighed. "Just have your breakfast." It was clear something was wrong, but I knew my father well. If he didn't say anything after my first question, there was no point in pressing further. So I just nodded and began to pour myself another serving of cereal into my bowl. After a few minutes, I watched him push his chair back and stand up from the table. "I gotta go to work, buddy. I'll see you tonight." He finished his coffee and placed the empty mug on the table with a soft clink. He barely looked at me as he left the room. Later that night, I was awakened by the sight of my father sitting on the edge of my bed. The room was dark, but the faint yellow light from the hallway, seeping through the crack of the slightly open door, was enough to make out the serious expression on his face as he sat there, staring at the floor. Confused, I turned to check the clock on my nightstand. It was 2:45 a.m. I looked back at my father. Was he just coming home from his shift? I wondered, perplexed. Rubbing the sleep from my eyes, I noticed he was holding his service pistol. "Dad?" I murmured, my gaze fixed on the gun in his hand. "You know I love you, right, kiddo?" He blurted out, still staring at the floor. That surprised me. We rarely said those words to each other. Don't get me wrong, my father and I had a great relationship. We were just not good with expressing our feelings. "Yeah," I said, sitting up. "I know." Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the living room, making my skin crawl. It sounded like the front door had been kicked in. Dad turned his head and focused for a few seconds in the direction of the bedroom door before lowering his gaze again. I saw a mixture of fear and sadness flood his face as he let out a tired sigh. "I should have known it would come back," he murmured softly, shaking his head. "What do you mean?" "I'll always be with you, you know?" He breathed out suddenly, still not looking at me. "Dad, what's going on?" I said, as fear spread through my body like wildfire. "No matter where you go, no matter what you do with your life, I'll always be with you." He tightened his grip on his gun as the words left his lips. "Please, Dad, just tell me what's happening." My trembling voice pleaded with him. "I love you, my son," he said, finally turning to face me. A serious but warm expression on his slightly wrinkled face. "I love you too, Dad." It was always hard for me to say those words to him, but in that moment, they left my lips without me realizing it, almost like a reflex. At that moment, a part of me felt I would regret not saying them more often in the past. "Now, promise me you won't leave this room until you hear the front door open," he demanded, with a stern look in his dark brown eyes staring directly at me. "What?" I murmured. "Why?" "Promise me." His voice rose, and he moved closer to me. "Why?" I asked. Normally, his raised voice was enough to make me comply, but this time I was too scared. I needed to know what was happening. "Promise me, my son." His voice cracked as he placed his hand on my shoulder. For a moment, I thought I was seeing him cry for the first time. I couldn't form any words. The shock of seeing him like this, something I thought was impossible, rendered me speechless. So I just nodded, my lips trembling and eyes welling up with tears. He sniffed and looked up at the ceiling for a few seconds, as if trying to hold back imminent tears. With a sigh, he looked back at me, pulled me close, kissed my forehead, and then walked toward the door. He stopped as soon as he reached the doorway and turned to look at me. "I'll do my best to end this, once and for all." Then he turned back around. He stood there, looked at his gun, and pressed the safety on his pistol, removed the magazine. After ensuring it was loaded, he reinserted it and cocked the chamber, producing a satisfying click that echoed through the dark room. With the gun in hand, he grabbed the doorknob, and I watched as he turned it and opened the door. Then he closed it behind him, leaving me in complete darkness. I sat on my bed in the pitch-black room, waiting and listening. My body trembled as I counted the seconds, not knowing what would happen next. Suddenly, a single gunshot rang through the house, followed by rapid, unnaturally fast footsteps. It sounded like a hammer was striking the wooden floor 100 times per second. A wet, crunching noise echoed through the walls, accompanied by a loud grunt from my father, followed by a loud crash and shattering glass. And just like that, it was silent again. I just sat there, heart racing. I wanted to run, to hide, to scream, but I couldn't move. It was as if my mind was wide awake in a sleeping body. Minutes that felt like hours passed. There, I sat in complete darkness, waiting. I mustered the courage and told myself I had to do something. I had to see if my father was okay. Suddenly, the turning of the doorknob and the squeaking of the hinges cut through the night silence, and I saw in horror the door slowly open. The silhouette of a man stood in the doorway. The faint yellow light from the hallway shone behind him. It was hard to tell if the man standing before me was my father or an intruder. I sat there, unable to make a sound, waiting and hoping to hear my father's voice emerge from the figure. Only a few seconds felt like an eternity. My heart pounded against my chest, beating so hard I could feel it pulsating in my throat. Suddenly, a car slowly drove past the house, and its headlights flashed through the gap in my curtains, just enough to recognize the blue of my father's uniform and the shine of his badge. With a sigh of relief, I felt the tension in my body ease. "Dad, you really scared me. What's happening? Did someone break in?" Whatever relief I felt was ripped away from my chest as I saw my dad drop to all four and crawl into a dark corner of the room with unnerving speed. My mind raced. This isn't Dad. This isn't Dad. This man is not my dad. It's amazing how quickly our brains can switch from relief to absolute terror. I did my best to stay still, hoping that it would somehow keep the man, who had crouched in the dark corner to my right, from harming me. All the while, I could watch him. I could hear his raspy breathing, just a few feet away. I tell you, feeling the full effects of adrenaline while your body is frozen with fear is like torture. I felt like my heart was going to burst out of my chest at any moment. Somehow, I found the courage to turn my head in the direction of the man. As soon as I did, he began to slowly rise. The loud cracking of bones echoed through the room as he did so. A cold, numb feeling sank deep into my stomach. He was now standing. At that moment, all I could think about was the lamp on my nightstand. I had to see him. Had to see it. Carefully, I reached for the lamp beside me and tugged on the cord, bathing the entire room in an orange light. As I stared at the man, my eyes widened so much they almost felt like they would pop out of my skull. What I saw made my heart sink. He wasn't just wearing my father's uniform. He also had my father's face. This man. This thing. Whatever it was, it had gnawed off my father's face and wore it like a damned mask. Blood was still dripping from him, running down the man's neck and streaking over the blue of the uniform. I just sat there, terrified, eyes bulging, as the man in the corner stood and stared at me. Through the holes where my father's eyes once were, I could see how lifeless the replacements looked. The man tilted his head as he stared at me, almost as if he was admiring the view before him. I don't even know how long he stood there, an hour? Maybe 2. Suddenly, he dropped to all fours again and crawled out of the room with inhuman speed, his hands and feet hitting the floor loudly. Even after he was gone, I still sat there, feeling like hours had passed. Still frozen. Finally, I mustered the courage to check. With bare feet pressing against the cold wooden floor, I slowly walked to the now wide-open door of my bedroom. As I entered the living room, I searched the room for my father, but he wasn't there. His gun lay on the floor, next to a pile of shattered glass in the frame of the broken coffee table. A large bloodstain led from there to the wide-open front door. I just stood there for a while, staring into space. The curtains fluttered as the wind blew through the open door into the house. After a while, I don't even know how long, I finally pulled myself together and dialed 911. After many questions, most of which I couldn't answer, they promised to catch whoever had done this. They said my father was one of them, and that they wouldn't rest until they caught the bastard. 2 years have passed. They never succeeded. I lived with my Aunt Gemma until I turned 18. I went to college, earned a degree in business administration, and managed well. Now, I'm 36. The same age my father was when it happened. After all this time, I never really understood what happened to my father. I avoided the topic for most of my life like the plague. But on my 36th birthday, Aunt Gemma called to wish me well. But as we spoke, she said the strangest thing. "Oh, honey, and don't worry about it. It was just a terrible coincidence." Her voice came through the phone. "What are you talking about, Aunt Gemma?" I replied, confused. "You know, the whole thing with your father and grandfather in turning 36. It was just a creepy and horrible coincidence." "Aunt Gemma, what do you mean? What happened to Grandpa?" "Did your father never tell you?" "No, he didn't." "Oh, then it's better that way, honey. I don't want to worry about nothing." I did my best to get her to explain, but she refused, and I dropped the subject. How stupid I was. Anyway, 2 months have passed since that conversation with my aunt. The reason I'm telling you all this is that about an hour ago, I looked out the window of my home office and saw someone standing on the sidewalk, under the streetlight in front of my house. The person was wearing a hood, making it hard to recognize who they were. Finally, I could see their face as the person looked at me. It looked like my father. I'm Jay Miles, and I want to share a story that has haunted me for years. Decades ago, I joined the New York Police Department. It was my way of giving back to society and trying to reconcile my own past. In my mid-20s, I had committed minor offenses in a desperate attempt to fit in. The youth culture back then idolized bad cops, and having a record was considered cool by many. Eventually, I grew out of that phase. For some of the emergency calls I responded to, I didn't have a fixed partner, and I'm simply grateful that for this particular shift, I had a partner, no matter what kind of entity was out there. Our patrol car was parked in a dark alley in the Brownsville neighborhood of Brooklyn, hidden between brick walls, waiting to catch reckless drivers. It was around 1 a.m. when we received the call. Someone had reported a woman walking barefoot with her baby down the streets, mumbling to herself. That was all the information we were given. We arrived at the scene. My partner Rob and I were on edge from the moment we stepped out of the car, not least because Brownsville was known for its troubled areas and high crime rates. After circling the neighborhood several times and finding no trace of the woman, we decided to park the car and knock on a few doors. The caller had been anonymous, so we couldn't speak to them directly. Most people were asleep at that hour, and we had to settle for the few individuals we encountered on the streets. "Do you see that?" Rob said. Someone vanished behind a wooden fence next to a row of townhouses, and we barely missed them. Rob and I jogged over to see if we could reach this person, our potential suspect. I could see the residents peeking through their curtains, curiously watching 2 police officers patrolling their neighborhood. It looked like the suspect had entered the garden of a house through an open gate, so we turned on our flashlights and followed her. The garden was pitch dark, and we couldn't see anything outside the narrow beam of our flashlights. I noticed that Rob's light was slightly trembling. "Are you okay?" I asked him. "I'm fine." "It's okay to be scared, man," I said, laughing. "Back off." A rusty swing creaked in the wind, and the trees around us rustled their leaves. My body shivered, not from the cold breeze, but from the eerie atmosphere. If I was unsettled, I could only imagine how Rob felt. "Excuse me, ma'am." The homeowner suddenly opened her back door. "Sorry, Mrs. Thompson," I said. "We'll be leaving your property shortly. We didn't mean to scare you. My partner and I are looking for a woman who was reported—" "Officer, I can't hear you well. Could you please come inside?" I went inside to speak with Mrs. Thompson while Rob continued to search the garden. I explained that we were looking for a woman acting strangely, walking around the neighborhood with a baby in her hand. As I talked to Mrs. Thompson, Rob shouted from outside, "Everything okay? What happened?" It looked like he had seen a ghost appear right before his eyes and then dissolve into thin air. I saw her. The woman? What did she look like? Come on, Rob, speak. He took a moment to catch his breath, placing a hand over his heart. She ran up the wall, right in front of me. She ran up the wall, Jay, like an animal. He pointed toward the 2-story house. I didn't know what to think. Rob had no history of mental illness that I was aware of, and he certainly wasn't on any drugs. I knew him well enough to confidently say that he wouldn't hallucinate in serious situations like police work. Well, I began awkwardly, did you see where she went? After she climbed the wall. The bushes over that metal fence there, he said, shining his light on it. I saw her moving. With drawn weapons, we jumped over the fence and searched the neighbor's property next door. Wait, Rob said. I heard you calling for backup. Shouldn't we wait for them? No, we can handle this ourselves. This garden was even larger than the other, but just as dark. We pointed our flashlights at a pile of wood in the corner of the garden. And before we could take another step, we heard someone crying. It sounded like a baby. Police! I slammed the door of the shed open, and we swept through the interior. The woman wasn't there, but there was a baby, a plastic baby. Rob pointed his light at the shed's floor. What the hell is this? A mechanical baby doll that could play recorded sounds and was placed there by someone to lure people in felt very strange to me. Not a moment later, our ears were pierced by a blood-curdling, high-pitched scream from the first house whose garden we had searched. As I rushed back to the other house, I noticed that Rob wasn't following. He wasn't moving at all. Come on, what the hell are you doing? I shouted. Rob's eyes widened as he stared at me, his mouth hanging open. I can't. I just can't, Jay. I'm sorry. I didn't have time to argue with him, so I continued, jumped over the fence and entered Mrs. Smith's house. What's going on? I asked her. I saw her. She was right there. Mrs. Smith pointed outside to her garden, to a spot on the ground, right next to the sliding glass door. She was just standing there, staring at me, and I think she smiled. Okay, which way did she go? Another scream. Rob's. When I returned to the shed, Rob was nowhere to be found. The plastic baby was also gone. I called out for him and searched everywhere, but he was simply gone. You know, it was like this mysterious woman could smell fear. It was something she seemed to tap into, and Rob had plenty of it that night. When backup finally arrived, I explained to my superiors at least a few hundred times what had happened. All of this happened decades ago, and Rob hasn't been found since. It's an unsolved case. When I think back to that night, my blood runs cold like nothing else. This mysterious woman, she was playing a game with both of us, and it feels like she won because of her experience. I'm not even sure why I still refer to her as a woman, as a human. Because if Rob's description says anything, she was something else. A whole year went by and I had different partners. I was stationed in Brooklyn, and sometimes my new partner John and I had to respond to calls coming from Brownsville. Eventually, I almost forgot everything, but I never forgot Rob, no matter where he was, dead or alive. However, that didn't last long. One night, while I was sitting in our precinct, John and I received a call. It seemed like another ordinary call until the dispatcher mentioned something about a woman talking to herself on the street and holding a crying baby. I should have known something was wrong the moment the patrol car rolled into the abandoned police station in East Detroit. The building looked ancient and deserted, its facade crumbling and overgrown with ivy. The police badge was askew, half buried in tall weeds, and the letters "Police" were missing from the sign above the main entrance, leaving only ICE visible. Graffiti covered the exterior walls, adding to the sense of neglect. If it weren't for the two other patrol cars parked at the far end of the lot, I might have thought we had arrived at the wrong place. The patrol cars were just as pitifully maintained as the station itself. Their badges and mottos, Serve and Protect, were faded and dirt-streaked. The tires were flat, and one of the taillights was shattered. Yes, all the warning signs should have been ringing in my head, but when you can't trust the police, who can you trust? I chalked up the building's poor condition to budget cuts. Since the officers couldn't strike, they often protested the city's tight finances by wearing mismatched socks and an assortment of odd pants, from camouflage patterns to clown stripes. 2 officers escorted me inside. If the main lobby was a hint, the interior was just as poorly maintained as the exterior. I waited at the reception desk on an old wooden chair. The green, cracked backrest didn't match the colors of the 2 officers beside me. As the officers exchanged a few words with the woman behind the desk, I couldn't help but notice how alike they all looked. It wasn't just their uniforms. The 3 of them were the same height, had the same hair color and style, carried themselves with the same posture, and had identical builds. "Excuse me," I interrupted, approaching the trio. One of the officers who had brought me turned to face me. "Yes?" he asked. I pointed to a chipped cup full of pens. "Can I have one?" "Sure, go ahead," he replied, his voice devoid of any emotion. I happily pocketed the pen and took my seat again. If I was stuck here all evening, at least I'd have a souvenir. The 3 continued their conversation as I waited in the stuffy lobby. Couldn't they at least open a window for some fresh air? The air was so thick and tasted so bitter that I could barely breathe. After the officers finished their business, they led me down a dirty corridor. Dry leaves crunched under my feet as I walked. Surely they could find some budget for a janitor. As we moved through the station, more details caught my eye. Missing doors, broken windows, and even a hole in the ceiling. Honestly, I almost expected to see a family of raccoons rummaging around. There were surprisingly few officers on duty. Wherever we went, we almost always encountered the same 2 men. "This way," one of the uniformed men said, pointing to a row of doors. "We'll get you when it's time." I nodded and stepped through the double doors. The smell on the other side was worse than in the lobby. It was a mix of sweat and the unique scent of slightly burnt skin after hours in the sun. No wonder the room was filled with men who had strikingly similar facial features to my own. Except for an old man in the corner, we all looked about the same age. "Probably we're all here for the sting operation, right?" I asked, trying to break the ice. The others averted their gazes. The situation wasn't ideal, but I saw no reason to be upset. It was our civic duty, and being grumpy wouldn't change anything. We had all been selected to serve as bait in a police sting operation. I hadn't been thrilled when the officers had pulled me over on my way home from work, telling me I matched the description of a violent robber. But I calmed down when they assured me I wasn't the suspect, just bait. I might have missed the season finale of my favorite show, but at least I was doing something useful for society. The old man slowly lifted his head. "Kid, you're not going to leave here that easily," he warned. When I saw his face, I almost gasped. He was old, sure, but his features were strikingly similar to mine. We had the same green eyes, a crooked nose, and similar cheekbones. If we walked together through Detroit, people would definitely think he was my father. "Oh, that's fine. I'm not in a hurry," I replied cheerfully. My gaze shifted from the old man to the others in the room. We all looked remarkably alike. Whoever the victim was, they'd have a hard time identifying the attacker. No one stood out. Even I would struggle to tell us apart. I thought the others would be as amused as I was, but they remained silent. Finding no one to talk to, I sat back down to wait for the officers to return. The silence began to make me nervous, as if everyone knew a secret I didn't. Occasionally, I noticed them staring at me from the corners of their eyes. It was unsettling. Silence. It was so quiet that I could hear the humming of the fluorescent lights running down the entire hallway. They buzzed in a strange rhythm, like instruments in a Beethoven orchestra. The door squeaked open. The others flinched and recoiled as an officer entered. Honestly, I couldn't tell if it was one of the two who had brought me in or another officer. It wasn't until I saw him beside the other men in the room that I realized he could pass as one of us too. The eyes, the cheekbones, he looked like me. Blood ran cold through my veins with the eerie realization that everyone I had seen in the past hour looked just like me. How had I not noticed earlier? I tried to shake the unsettling feeling with a forced shiver, but only partially succeeded. The officer raised a hand, his index finger pointing at the six of us. You there. You two, you and you, by the wall, he ordered. I stood up and walked over as the other five reacted with gasps and groans. They approached reluctantly. Although I didn't understand their grim reactions, I felt somewhat the same. Still, the faster we got through the sting, the sooner we could go home. Luckily, I had been selected to be part of Group 1. The officer handed out numbered placards. My placard, number 5, looked ancient. The corners were rounded and worn. Coffee stains covered the surface and yellowed tape held parts of it together. The others took their placards with as much enthusiasm as a child being served a plate of steamed broccoli. I had never seen grown men mimic the childish dread and accompanying pout so perfectly until that day. After receiving our numbers, we were led into an oppressive, cramped room with the doors at both ends. I could hear the door behind us lock, making me wonder if the robber was in the room with me. Luckily, I was in a police station. If there was a place where a violent robber wouldn't attempt something foolish, it was right in the middle of a police station. The back wall was decorated with faded size charts, like those seen in police mugshots. They let me see that we were all exactly the same height, save for half an inch. In front of us was a large glass pane through which we saw a pair of identically looking officers sitting on stools, watching us. That was odd, I thought. Don't they usually use double mirrors? Not me, not me, not me, muttered number 3, his voice trembling with fear. He wasn't the only one acting strange. No. 1 and no, 4 had curled up in a corner, turning their backs to the window. No, 2 and no, 6 were fidgeting and whispering under their breath. Grow up, I thought. Why was everyone so nervous? Had I missed something obvious? Could we get in trouble if we were mistakenly identified? The victim entered the room on the other side of the glass pane. Although he kept his head down, I couldn't ignore the similarities. He had my stature and my haircut, though his body was covered in bruises and blood. A shiver ran down my spine, filling me with the same anxious fear as my fellow baiters. A feeling in my gut urged me to run, but I found myself paralyzed by an inexplicable fear. That was ridiculous. There was no reason to be afraid, or at least that's what I hoped. My nervousness grew with every step the victim took. He looked pretty battered. There was no reason to believe he hadn't been attacked by a robber, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was going on. The victim's head turned upwards. "Oh, God," I whispered. I looked at myself. He wasn't just a rough likeness like the others. No, he was definitely me. Even through the swollen lip and black eye, I recognized every square inch of my face, the placement of my freckles, my childhood scar along the hairline, my right eye, which was slightly smaller than the left. He had them all. I didn't have time to fully comprehend the phenomenon before the doppelganger raised his arm, extending an accusing finger. I knew before he did it. I knew he would point at me. I knew it. But it didn't stop me when he did. It felt like being hit by a flying baseball. He pointed directly at me, an electrifying sensation coursing through my body as he did. If that wasn't bad enough, the others in the sting operation suddenly calmed down. They looked as if they had just dodged a bullet, sending me into a panic. When I saw the officers standing up from their seats and staring at me, I knew I had to flee. I ran toward the emergency exit door. The door was locked. I could hear the sound of a key jangling on the other side of the room. There was no longer any doubt in my mind that the officers were after me. With a surge of adrenaline, I grabbed a fire extinguisher and smashed it against the doorknob. It took 3 attempts before it finally broke, allowing the door to open just as the officers entered from the other side. I could vaguely hear them shouting, though I couldn't make out a word over the combined sounds of my pounding heart and the blood rushing to my head. I ran as fast as I could, feeling myself drown in inexplicable fear. Lost. I was lost. Lost in the building. Lost in fear. Lost in desperate and unyielding panic. An alarm blared, practically paralyzing me with its piercing screech. More than ever, I wanted to escape the endless maze of rundown hallways and broken lights. I could barely hear the officer's footsteps over the mechanical warning siren, but my senses were just sharp enough to dodge them safely. I ran for what felt like hours, though it might have been minutes. I ran until my chest burned with exhaustion and my muscles cramped. I ran until I stumbled back into the waiting room where I had been earlier. Hoping to warn the others, I stepped inside. The room was empty, except for the old man in the back. "Hey," I shouted. "We need to get out of here." He didn't respond. I moved closer and noticed something on his head. My scar. That's impossible, I thought, gasping for air in shock. I placed a hand on his shoulder to shake him, but he had gone cold. His skin was dry and wrinkled, like a tomato left out in the sun too long. I recoiled in terror, a loud scream escaping my lips. Suddenly, I felt a pair of fingers digging into my shoulder with the strength of a crocodile's bite. I screamed again and desperately tried to shove the abductor's hand away. By awkwardly twisting my shoulder, I managed to break free from the vice-like grip and turned around, only to face my bloodied doppelganger. A look of bitter contempt was permanently etched into his face. I had never realized how unsettling that expression was when I gave it to others. My double was deliberately blocking the exit, ensuring that escape wouldn't be easy. As he moved toward me, I acted instinctively, feeling my arm fly toward his face. The sound of shattering glass erupted from him as my fist connected with his already damaged eye. Pain. Sharp, blinding pain. I stumbled to the side, clutching my throbbing right eye. It pounded and stabbed like 1,000 needles. My vision blurred, but not so much that I couldn't see the other me charging at me. I had to defend myself. I punched, elbowed, and shoved him. Only a few of my strikes landed. I'm no martial arts expert, but the ones that did made the pain surge within me. My frantic attack ended when I pounded into his stomach. The pressure almost took my breath away. There was no overcoming it. I had to run. I shoved him aside, fully expecting him to try to grab me. To my surprise, he fell to the ground and didn't attempt to get up. Had I hurt him more than I thought? My relief was short-lived. As soon as I re-entered the hallway, I bumped into 2 officers. Their expressions were strangely blank. A thought crossed my mind when I noticed I was covered in bruises. What if they thought I was the victim? "He's in there," I said, gathering every fiber of my composure. The officers ran into the waiting room without hesitation. I didn't know how long my deception would hold, so I ran toward the main entrance. When I reached the lobby, the receptionist from earlier was standing up and turned to face me. I only looked at her for a moment, but my eyes caught the scar on her head. What the hell? There was no time to think or try to understand. She started to chase me, so I ran as fast as I could through the doors. The air outside smelled so fresh, free from the stagnant aftertaste inside the police station. It was dark, and I remember feeling hopeful that I could hide and escape in the night. I heard pounding footsteps behind me, saw beams of light aimed at me, and heard sirens wailing in the distance. I remember running, but I admit I don't remember how I got home. I have no memory of reaching my apartment building, unlocking my door, or getting into bed. But that must have happened. This morning, I woke up safe and sound in my bed, though quite sore. When I got up to brush my teeth, my reflection sent a chill down my spine. My face was blue and swollen. The wounds were identical to those of the victim in the police station. The shattered lip, the black eye, and the cut on his cheek. They were all the same. My heart raced wildly, blurry after images dancing in my head. Running. Police officers. My face everywhere. As I leaned back, I felt something in my pocket. I reached in and pulled out the pen I had taken from the police station, examining it closely. The motto of the Detroit Police was written on it, though half of it was smeared. It read, "Serve." I'm now an old man. Recently, I was diagnosed with an incurable disease, and I've been given less than 6 months to live. I had no children, though my dear wife and I had always wished for them. She was ravaged by cancer before her 25th birthday and had to undergo surgery where all her female organs were removed. They took away the playground, leaving just the slide, so to speak. When I was 23, I enrolled in the police academy in Springfield, Illinois. I graduated with honors at the top of my class and was assigned to a tiny rural town that I'll keep unnamed. I won't disclose the name of the city, the county, or the real names of the suspects mentioned here. For years, I wanted to share these stories with someone but was afraid of the confidentiality agreements I signed when I joined the force. What will they do to me now? Eat me alive? Take my birthday? Damn, I have no hope of seeing my next birthday anyway. I will try to follow the rules of this forum as best as I can, but some of the stories I need to tell aren't long enough to form a complete post, and some are interconnected. So, without further procrastination, here are my tales from patrols in a rural area. My first strange shift was in May 1977. I was parked at a local rest stop, monitoring for speeding and reckless drivers. God, it was hot that day. I was sweating like a sinner in church. I remember that just before the radio crackled to life, things seemed to change. I went from being just hot and sweaty to feeling an overwhelming, primal panic. When the static broke through, I thought I was going to pass out, damn it all. Unit 75, respond. Unit 75, copy that. Unit 75, the dispatch is informing you that you're parked at local name rest area. Is that your current location? Yes, dispatch, that's my position, out. Good. We've just received an anonymous tip that a black semi-truck is speeding down the road toward the old mining facility. The driver is said to have crossed the road entirely and nearly hit a school bus. It's reported that the truck has a large bulldog emblem on the windshield as a distinguishing feature. Can you head to the mine and report back? Understood, dispatch. I drove my patrol to the mining facility, headlights on, speeding yet cautious. I know I can do this, okay? I've never pulled someone over just for speeding before. Anyway, I turned onto Highway 35, which led to the old mine. I was about a mile down that road when I saw the smoke from a truck. It must have been emitting absolutely black exhaust fumes, with 4-meter-high smoke columns billowing from the old Freightliner's tailpipe. I closed the distance between us and turned on the sirens to encourage the driver to slow down and stop. The road was too narrow to pull to the side, so I couldn't force him off the road, and my presence behind him didn't seem to affect his speed. I glanced at the driver's door to identify him, but the windows were as dark as the paint. At one point, we were both racing down a 1.5-lane road at 95 miles per hour, with no possibility for another vehicle to pass. I called dispatch and asked them to block the road at the other end. It took 3 minutes for 2 more patrol cars to take the short detour around town and block the road. We don't know if any other vehicles entered that road during that time. It was a Freightliner with a silver bulldog emblem, and one patrol car was speeding almost 100 miles per hour down a narrow, winding mountain road, deep in the wilderness. The only damned things on that road were a campground we had already passed and the abandoned mine we were heading toward. At that time, there were thankfully very few houses on that road. During the chase, dispatch informed me that I had permission to immobilize the truck if possible. I drew my service revolver from my holster and aimed it out the window at the far rear left tire. All 6 shots hit the tire. I watched it blow out and distort each time, but it didn't slow the driver at all. I reported to dispatch, and they told me to refrain from further aggression and reduce my speed to the legal limit since the man had no way out. I hated it, but a command is a command. I released the gas pedal and let the truck pull ahead of me. He also slowed down. I shook my head. I remember thinking something like, "Oh, this bastard is getting on my nerves now." As a side note, back then it wasn't uncommon for officers and the good old boys to butt heads during an arrest. It was almost expected with certain suspects. I admit I had intended to teach that jerk a lesson. He could have killed the kids on the bus. He could have taken out every vehicle in the opposite direction on that road. As we both slowed, the black smoke rising from the exhaust pipes took on a different quality. It shimmered like a heat-induced mirage. It was strange. While it shimmered, I felt drawn to the shapes and the smoke. I had to fight to keep control of my vehicle. At one point, about 300 feet from the entrance of the old mine, the truck went around a bend, and for less than a second my view was blocked. When I looked over the hill, it was gone. No smoke, no wreck. It hadn't driven off the road or hidden. It had simply, damn it, vanished. Unit 75, respond out. Unit 75, this is dispatch. Dispatch, the truck from the pursuit on Highway 35 has disappeared. Repeat, the big truck is gone. Unit 75, the units at the end of the road didn't see the truck but heard it drive through the mine. Out. Dispatch, that's impossible. We haven't gone that far yet. Unit 75, check and respond. Out. I sped to the mine entrance. Since the site was abandoned, they had installed one of those swinging iron gates at the entrance. It was dented. The damage was old and already heavily rusted, so I knew it wasn't the Freightliner. I drove up the rough country road to the plateau of the hill where the open pit mine was. The roads twisted and turned with several 90-degree hairpins. No way a truck could accelerate there, and damn it, that was all I could do to avoid having to reset my stubborn Ford and make another attempt. I reached the plateau and saw at the edge of the excavation, where the mining company lost the coal, an old, rusted truck pressed against the rock. It looked like it had rolled down the hill, and someone had dragged it back up and parked it there out of the way. I parked my patrol car and got out to inspect it. As I got closer, I could see the truck was burned. Most of the paint was intact, replaced by a few years of rust. I approached the driver's side of the battered cab and was astonished to find the door open. The door frames hadn't had the paint burned off, and they were as black as the coal dust I was walking on. I stared at the wreck for a moment, and then I saw it. A large silver bulldog emblem hanging from the top of the cab. Dispatch had sent the other 2 patrol cars to my location when I didn't respond to radio calls. They found me crouched beside the cab, staring at the piece of metal I still had with me. I know I saw it as a bulldog, but when they arrived, it was a distorted mass of crusted aluminum. No one knew what to make of the incident or the situation. We eventually reported that the truck had escaped. Later that year, I learned that the truck driver had one day rolled his rig down the mountainside with 2 full coal bunkers. 8 years before I chased him on that road. I guess he makes the trip once a year. I was called upon again the next year, but I didn't bother to chase him again. I just drove to the mine and placed a silver bulldog emblem on the rusted wreck. I'm tired, folks. I have better stories, but this one weighs on me for some reason. Maybe it's because I saw that truck parked on my farm, maybe because of my age and the cancer, but it still weighs on me. I live on an island. This island lies off the northeastern coast of Louisiana, nestled deep within the sprawling bayous of the Gulf Coast, and is relatively unknown to most people, except for those who saw the one movie that was filmed here. Sure, in the summer, when the weather is warm and the mosquitoes are relentless, we receive a steady influx of tourists eager to experience a genuine Louisiana bayou and the charming small-town lifestyle in America. But mostly, about 800 people reside on this tiny island year-round. At least that's how many people you actively see around. There are probably more, but the rest consist of reclusive, simple hermits who spend a total of 15 minutes per year in direct sunlight. Maybe you've heard of this island before. If you've ever vacationed somewhere in the Louisiana Bayou region, there's a good chance you know exactly which island I'm talking about. Please, for the sake of all readers' sanity and mine as the author, keep it to yourself. If you don't know which island I'm referring to, perfect, just stay away. There are many reasons why I say this, but the three most important are: this place is boring. After the summer crowds disappear, all we have left is a movie theater, a bowling alley where people like to unwind, and a few pizzerias of varying quality. You'll almost certainly get seasick on the ferry ride to my island. Most of the ferry company's staff are grumpy people who have little to no interest in your comfort and live by the unofficial slogan, "We're not happy until you're not happy either." If you're not an experienced islander, or not exceptionally well-trained, armed, and smart, there's a pretty good chance you'll survive here for about 3 days before you disappear. I've been working here as a police officer for a few years now. I'm by no means an expert, nor am I that old, but I like to think I know my job, and I can't even begin to count all the missing person reports we receive here. It's truly astonishing. I don't mean that we have a few more missing people than the national average. I mean 3 to 4 people per week disappear right under people's noses without warning. In a town our size, that's a pretty significant number. At this point, investigating these cases is an exercise in futility. Last year, we lost about 200 people in total. Do you know how many we found? 3. 3 people. These 3 individuals were mostly unharmed. They were reintegrated into society, the only real issue being the fact that none of them had any fingers. It was really quite interesting to see. I don't mean they had their fingers cut off or anything, but they looked like these people were born without fingers. I knew one of them. He used to have fingers. He still denies it, and I've stopped trying to convince him otherwise. That's just one of the many strange things that happen here, to be honest. Working as a police officer isn't exactly easy when in half of all break-in cases, the victim claims the intruder was a lizard-dog hybrid person. I'm not exactly sure what they mean by that, but the number of cases with this similarity is too high to ignore. At least it makes writing the reports entertaining. My partner and I have seen some pretty crazy things, so strange animal-human hybrids don't sound quite as out of the realm of possibility to us as they might to others. Anyway, I wanted to start documenting some of the things that go on here. Last week, one of my usual suspects, John, told me that people who aren't from here might enjoy the things we do daily. I thought this would be the perfect place for that. I've seen how open-minded most of you are, but whether you believe any of this or not doesn't make much of a difference. Hopefully, you can still enjoy it. I'm not entirely sure where to begin a story. I could tell you about the time we got a call from one of our local cemeteries where every single grave had been dug up and all 432 bodies had mysteriously disappeared. We found them all a little later in the grocery store when the manager came in to open for the day. They appeared as if they had been staged, as if they were shopping. That happened between 7 and 7:30 in the morning when the on-site janitor was taking his daughter to school, which was somewhat unusually quick for most teenage pranksters. I could also talk about the time when every spoon on the island disappeared, including my own set. These, unlike the 432 bodies, were never found again, and this case is technically still open. Honestly, these are just everyday occurrences for us. Normality here is a relative term. However, one of the strangest events occurred during my last night shift. My partner Kyle and I are usually on duty from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., so we're often around when something happens at night. A few days ago, we got a call about such a noise. At 3:33 a.m., we heard, "Unit 700 to dispatch, over." "Unit 700, go ahead," I responded over the radio in our patrol car. "We have a report of an intruder. I've removed the address to respect the owner's privacy. The caller says they've heard multiple unexplained noises in their basement." I sighed and looked at Kyle before replying. "Unit 700, copy that. En route." We turned on our lights and sirens, slowly pulled our patrol car from the curb, and headed towards the house in downtown. We arrived in less than 10 minutes and got out of the vehicle. "You want to take the lead?" Kyle asked. He looked like a corpse. I suspected he hadn't slept since the night before, so I said, "Sure, buddy," and knocked on the door. I had barely touched the door with my knuckles when it swung open, and I almost punched the young woman in the nose. "Thank God you're here," she exclaimed. I had never seen her before, which was strange to me because I had met most people on this island at least once. She was short and plump, with dark brown hair, and introduced herself as Kathy, spelled with 2 Ks. She was wearing Star Wars pajamas and looked a bit older than me. After introductions, she invited Kyle and me into her house. I heard someone rummaging through my basement. "I'm the only one at home. My husband is at a conference on the mainland," Kathy explained. At first, I thought it might be a small animal, but then I heard a voice. I was too scared to go down there, so I called you guys. I nodded. "We'll check it out for you, ma'am. Don't worry. Why don't you wait outside, okay? Is there an exit in the basement?" I asked, trying not to sound as excited as I felt. I mean, maybe I would finally see this lizard-dog-human thing. Who wouldn't be excited about that? She shook her head and nervously fiddled with her shirt. "Please, just don't open the basement closet." I looked at Kyle. "Why?" he asked, slowly and thoughtfully. She continued to fumble and look down at her shoes. "It's just in there. I have a lot of stuff stacked up in there, and well, they're fragile, and..." She trailed off. "Well, ma'am, we might have to take a look. Now, please go outside or to the living room, away from the basement," I instructed her. Of course, we now had to check the closet. We drew our weapons and turned on the basement light. "Police!" I shouted down the stairs. No response. Carefully, we made our way down the stairs into the basement. Basement was a strong word. This place consisted of solid concrete, practically just the foundation, and was strewn with unmarked boxes. I mean, stacked so high that we couldn't see the entire room at any point. Many dead zones. Shit. There was a path, something like that, running through the basement. Following it, we found a medium-sized wooden door on the back wall. "Well then," Kyle said, "must be the closet." "Yeah," I replied shortly. We waited. "You want to open it?" I asked. "No." "And you?" he responded. "Nah," I said, reaching for the handle. I made eye contact with my partner and quickly yanked the door open while we both pointed our pistols and mounted flashlights inside, where we saw several thousand glass eyes staring directly at us. "Whoa!" Kyle screamed and jumped back. I have to admit, it wasn't what I expected. Maybe a few lab equipment pieces or even an old wine barrel would have been less surprising, but this was not. They were eyes. Huh. I muttered more to myself. We kept our lights on the oversized room and looked at the many, many shelves where the eyes were placed. "This has to go further into the floor," Kyle thought out loud. I nodded and slowly directed my light down to the floor. Right at the lower end of the back wall, it landed on a small hole. I paused. "Damn," I said to Kyle. "Looks like something crawled in here," he explained. The hole was definitely too small for a human, but larger than a mouse or rat hole. "Maybe it's..." he began, when suddenly a small black and white creature scampered past us on all fours. "Oh shit," I yelled, and turned just in time to see a bushy black and white tail disappear up the stairs. "Was that a raccoon?" Kyle asked. My shoulders slumped. "Yeah," I said, putting my gun away. "I think so." We heard a shrill scream from above and looked at each other. "Kathy!" we both yelled. We ran up the stairs and found her trembling by the living room door. It went this way," she stammered. She looked pale. "It's okay, Kathy, it's just a raccoon," I said to her. "Stay away from the door and we can try to get it out without your whole house smelling." She nodded, swallowed, and slowly moved away from the entrance. This is really going to stink if I get sprayed, I thought to myself. A glance at my partner's face confirmed that I wasn't the only one having that thought. Slowly, Kyle opened the door. I opened the last one, so by the police friendship protocol, it was his turn. We peered into the dark room and could faintly make out a couch, an armchair, a fireplace, and a few more shelves. These, however, had books on them, which was a pleasant change. What we didn't see was a raccoon. "What are you going to do?" Kyle whispered. I shrugged. "I say we sneak around and try to herd it into the main hall," I suggested. "Fuck it," was Kyle's only response. Fuck it worked for me, and we crept into the room, moving clockwise behind the couch, to the fireplace, and around the armchair back to our starting point. No raccoon. "Here, Stinky Stinky. Stinky," Kyle whispered. "Well, that's damn rude," said a male voice with a strong southern accent. We both froze. "Who said that?" I called into the small room after a few seconds. "I did, asshole. What the fuck are you deaf for?" The voice came back. I drew my weapon and turned on the light. Kyle did the same. "Where are you? What are you doing in here?" I asked the bodiless voice. "I'm right here, you idiot." Our weapons fell between the armchair and the couch onto the floor, where the raccoon was sitting and looking at us. "There's no way that... Did it do that?" Kyle whispered to me. "I can hear you, you know," said the raccoon. "Yeah, it did," I responded incredulously to Kyle's question. "I'm not an it, asshole. I am a man," the raccoon shouted. "What the hell? How can you speak?" I asked the rodent. "How can you speak? Damn, I thought you cops were supposed to be smart," he replied angrily. "Don't ask stupid questions." I didn't appreciate the cheek of this raccoon. "Well, what are you doing in this lady's house? Why don't you cuddle into a hole or something?" I asked, also irritated. "That's damn racist, pig. Fuck you. Just because I'm a raccoon doesn't mean I have to live in a hole. Believe it or not, raccoons appreciate finer living conditions too, you know. It's damn cold out there." The raccoon shot back, as if it was obvious. "Can you please watch your language? There's no reason to be rude," Kyle interjected. "You called me a pet, damn it. I'm not your pet, asshole. I have 3 damn kids." The raccoon raised its tail in addition to its voice. "All right," I yelled. "How about this? I'll make a deal with you," I said, looking at the raccoon. It paused. "What kind of deal?" it asked after a few seconds. "I can't leave you in this lady's house, okay? But what I can do is take you back to the station if you promise not to stink up the car. We can get you something to eat, and you can spend the night there, and we'll find you somewhere. Nicer tomorrow," I said, hesitating on the last part. I wanted to help a raccoon go shopping tomorrow on my day off. The raccoon thought for a moment. "And I won't get arrested or anything?" it asked slowly. "Nah," I replied. It waited a few more moments and then said, "All right, but I can ride as a passenger. Deal?" Hey, wait." Kyle began to speak, but I gave him a look that said, "Please don't unleash the angry, talking, walking stink bomb of doom." And he fell silent. The 3 of us walked out of the living room, and Kathy let out a small squeak when she saw the raccoon. "Get out! Get out!" she screamed. "Damn lady, I know I didn't ask for permission or anything, but I have a name, you know," the raccoon said. Kathy turned pale. Did it just speak? She asked, her voice barely audible. Yes it did, I replied with a smile. Oh, she muttered, moments before she collapsed on the floor. I considered calling an ambulance, but decided against it. She would wake up soon enough in a stink-free house. I just wished I had the chance to ask her about all the glass eyes in the basement. By the way, what's your name? Kyle asked. For the report, I mean. The raccoon looked at him. My name, since you politely asked, is Daniel Sharp III, it replied, tilting its head slightly. And you two could. I'm Officer Kyle Shepard, and this is my partner, Officer Miller, Kyle said to Daniel, pointing at me. Daniel the raccoon looked at both of us and then said, Well then, pleasure to meet you both. As we left Kathy's house, the night air was thick with humidity and the chorus of nocturnal creatures. The bayou's eerie silence was only broken by the distant hoot of an owl and the occasional splash of water. Driving back to the station, Daniel the raccoon sat quietly in the passenger seat, staring out the window with those same glassy eyes. He's something else, Kyle muttered, shaking his head. Talking raccoon, that's a first. I nodded, still processing the bizarre encounter. Yeah, and he was pretty demanding about not stinking up the car. Do you think he's dangerous? Kyle asked, glancing at me. I don't know, I replied. But he's not alone. Those glass eyes in the basement. There's something more going on here. As we pulled into the station, Daniel hopped out of the car and glanced back at us. Thanks for the lift. I appreciate it, he said. I owe you one. Just stay out of trouble, Kyle replied dryly. Daniel nodded and disappeared into the shadows of the bayou, leaving us with more questions than answers. We entered the station, and I headed straight to my desk, determined to look up any reports or folklore related to talking animals or mysterious disappearances on the island. Hours later, as I sifted through old case files and local legends, I stumbled upon a faded newspaper clipping from the 1980s. It detailed a series of bizarre incidents involving missing persons and strange sightings in the bayou. One headline stood out: Mystery of the Bayou Beast. Local man claims to communicate with enigmatic creature. The article described how a man named Daniel Sharp had vanished without a trace, only to return years later with tales of a hidden realm beneath the bayou, inhabited by creatures that could mimic human speech and manipulate perceptions. Authorities dismissed it as a hoax, but a few persistent officers reported unexplained phenomena during their investigations. Realizing the connection, I shared the article with Kyle. Looks like our Daniel might not be just a raccoon after all. Kyle frowned. Do you think there's truth to these old legends? I don't know, I admitted. But if there is, we need to find out. Those missing people, what happened to them? Determined to uncover the truth, we decided to revisit Kathy's house the next day, this time prepared for whatever we might encounter. As the dawn broke over the bayou, the mist hovered thick over the water, and the first rays of sunlight began to pierce through the canopy. Driving back to Kathy's house, we approached with caution. The neighborhood was quiet, the air heavy with anticipation. We knocked again, and Kathy answered the door, looking more composed than the night before. Good morning, ma'am. We need to ask you a few more questions about last night, I said. She nodded, leading us to the living room. I'm still trying to process what happened. That raccoon, Daniel. It wasn't normal. Kyle leaned forward. Have you noticed anything unusual since then? Any other strange occurrences? Kathy hesitated before replying. There have been noises. Whispers at night, shadows moving in the corners of my eyes. I thought I was losing my mind. As we delved deeper into her experiences, it became clear that there was a pattern of supernatural activity tied to the island's mysterious history. Determined to get to the bottom of it, Kyle and I began to piece together the puzzle. uncovering secrets that had been buried for decades. The bayou held many secrets, and as we navigated its murky depths, we realized that some mysteries are better left untouched. But as police officers sworn to protect and serve, we couldn't turn a blind eye to the unexplained phenomena that plagued our community. What started as a simple call about a raccoon had unveiled a web of paranormal intrigue that would test our limits and challenge everything we thought we knew about the bayou. As the whispers in the night grew louder and the shadows deeper, we braced ourselves for the truth that lay hidden beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered.